So we have made it to the final talk of our day, our closing keynote. So for all of you who have been with us from the morning, thank you. We appreciate you. We hope you've learned a ton from our sessions. And do you want to do the intros?
Yeah, sure. And also just, if there's anything you want to say to us in the chat, this is your community too. Show of hands if you've been here all day. You get gold stars for that. Thank you to everybody who's been contributing questions all day. Thank you to our speakers who have stayed and have been here all day, like Chris and Kat, who really have been contributing to the whole conversation, to the whole day. This has been a hot topic, and we're so happy that you chose it, and we're happy that everybody was excited about it. So thanks to everyone for all of that. Let's bring in Kat and Chris. So this is another talk and group of amazing folks that I met during the Platform Engineering Day at KubeCon in Paris. And Chris did a really great talk with slides and the whole thing. But really what came out of that is like, we just want to pick your brain about some more stuff. We want to talk to you about stuff. And so we asked Kat to come in and facilitate and moderate a fireside chat. You can't see the fire that is in front of us. And I'm sure there's a glass of scotch or whiskey around here somewhere. But I knew it wasn't too far away. Yeah, so just everybody visualize a nice, fire, some plush leather chairs, and maybe a cat sitting in someone's lap. And let's talk about platform engineering at NatWest.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, everyone. Can you all hear us okay? Wonderful. So I'm Kat, I'm product manager at Syntasso, and luckily for me, you've already had a demo from Abby, so I don't need to do any product pitches for you. So I can go straight into saying I'm really lucky to be talking to the brilliant Chris Plank today, enterprise architect and self-proclaimed platform evangelist at NatWest. Since it's nearly bedtime in the UK, like Lisa said, we've got a glass of whiskey each today. I've got a lovely Irish green spot, which Chris has told me off for because it has an E in it. And I'll hand over to him to do a quick introduction of himself and tell you about his drink of choice.
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Chris Plank. Hello from Scotland. I'm in Perthshire. As Kat said, I'm an enterprise architect. I'm a platform evangelist, working on our platform as a product initiative. I'm also the joint product owner. See Kat's having a drink. I've waited all night. I've tried to stay good. I have a lovely 14-year-old Balvenie here tonight, Ushkawea. What are you having, Kat?
I've got a green spot, which is an Irish.
It's spelt wrongly, but never mind. It's all good. So it's been a fantastic day. Really enjoyed today. I'm really thankful for being asked to come and talk tonight. So hopefully you get something out of this.
And for those of you who aren't in the UK, can you tell us a little bit about NatWest as a bank, what it does? Because for those in the UK, you'll know this is massive. It's one of the top banks in the UK.
Yeah, absolutely. We are now a UK-focused bank. We serve 19 million customers. We've got 62,000 staff. So I think some of the things I'll talk about tonight are about scale and about the size of the organisation. I've taken a lot of notes from today about some of the other speakers. It's really good to hear some of them talking earlier. I'm looking, I think, at Ariete. I was talking about scale and the size. I think they're bigger than us, so it's good to have a kind of range of people there. We process about 750 million transactions a month. I think the last time I checked, the stat that people like to use was actually 1 in 4 of UK payments processed a few years ago. We're growing, we're successful. We had 1.5 million new savings accounts last year. We had 1 million extra personal current accounts added. As I say, we serve 19 million customers, and we meet about 94%, I think it is the stat, of their needs digitally. So, very successful on the digital side of things.
Yeah, so like Reti, I think, from SAP was serving tens of thousands of developers with her platform. There's similar scale at NatWest, so hopefully we can learn a little bit about what that's like. So let's get started around platforms at NatWest. So we've heard a lot of talks about building IDPs. We had that brilliant panel about that and dodging the pitfalls. So what were the challenges that you were trying to solve at NatWest that led you towards platform as a product?
Yeah, there were a lot of great points there. Some of the things that were said I agree with and I disagree with, and we'll touch on that later today, especially William Rizzo. I've got some comebacks against some of the things you said. We had a good chat at KubeCon about these things. I think what we're trying to talk about at the moment, what we're trying to do is transformation. We've been really successful over the last 7 years in our transformation for our internal cloud and our public cloud adoption. We've got lots of applications out there and lots of usage, across the business. Got some fantastic business units that we've enabled with Terraform and the tooling for that, and off they go and they look after things. We've got lots of applications running on our platform as a service, thousands of applications to be honest. We've got hundreds of applications and hundreds of landing zones in public cloud. We've got these standardized patterns. We've got 135-ish of those that we've got in our library. And those over time have become all things to all people. Those have become the documentation-based golden paths and all those different controls and things that people have been talking about today, where more and more over those last 7 years have kind of been put into those patterns. And you think about the technology that's coming out now, and even in the last year, the maturity that's come around in platform engineering, the whole of the landscape that we've just shown kind of on screen in the Great Canoe presentation there. Things are moving faster now than probably they moved in the previous 7 years. And so we're facing a challenge where we've got to maintain those patterns. We've got to keep the show on the road, but we've got to transform at the same time. And how do you do that? And so one of the things that we've done is we've kind of classified all the work that we're doing. We've looked at those different types of patterns and said, look, we can't keep doing them the way we do them. We can't keep refreshing them. You heard a lot about that today. A lot of things that people are saying about how do you do day two? How do you look after things and keep them going? How do you look after things when that platform team's disbanded and moved on? Those are all the challenges we've got in larger organizations, with tens of divisions, hundreds of teams, thousands of developers. You've got all those silos. And I'm going to throw back one of Eddie's quotes earlier on. IDP is a silo buster. That's one of the things that we kind of picked up and looked at and said, how do we use that with all this stuff that's going on? How do we classify our patterns and start thinking about them differently? So that's kind of the challenge that we've been trying to face using this.
Yeah, you've told me before that there are sometimes, like the stuff that you've done already served a really good subsection of the business, those who wanted to learn or knew about some of the more low-level technologies. But actually, there's a large majority that kind of don't care about those specifics or details, and helping them on board is just as important, and helping them do their job efficiently.
Yeah, I mean, that classification I talk about, those patterns, if we look at those at the moment, we've probably got about the top 20% are off doing self-service, self-hosting themselves, right? We've given them the tools, made them highly successful. They've got a lot of really skilled people in those teams, and we heard a lot of people talking about kind of skills and cognitive load earlier. So they've got all those teams have got all that knowledge and ability to go off and do that. But then we've got this 80% that are really, they don't have the level of people, they don't have the level of skills, they still want to do those innovative things, right? And so we've done DevOps managed services, and we've kind of helped provision things for them. But there's a lot of challenges with that, right? They're doing the orchestration themselves. They don't really have the golden path. They're trying to follow the documentation steps to do that, and it can be time consuming. So how do we shrink that time down, shrink that cognitive load, abstract it away and make it easy for them to use in a kind of product oriented approach? That's what we're trying to do. And you can think of those as like that 80%, right? You've got to keep the show on the road for that 20% that are doing the really fantastic stuff and can do it themselves. But how do we help that other part of the organization?
Yeah, I can see why you went to platform as a product with all of those needs and challenges that you've had, and like that natural journey from DevOps and scaling it to platforms. But how did you find out about it in the first place? It was sort of alluded to earlier with
it was
with the Abby Bangser faces.
Yeah, Bangser was everywhere, right? We've had a double helping of Abby tonight. I did a lot of research. We spent a lot of time reading blog posts. We spent a lot of time looking at YouTube videos, talking to people, going to different conferences and meeting people. The amount of times I met Abby and I met Paula and other people from Syntasso. We were kind of operating in that field. And if we go back a year ago, you know, it wasn't as mature, I think, as it is today. You know, like the platform maturity model that Abby talked about, it didn't exist a year ago. You know, it was in draft format. You know, it was one of the things that she'd been working on, donating it to the CNCF, and then other people were commenting on it, but that came out late last year. It didn't exist when we were looking at all of this. So it's a brilliant guiding tool, and I wish it was there when we started. But you know, all the things that Abby talked about today and all the things that other people have talked about, those are the things that we were hearing. We were watching the videos. We kind of went wide and went deep, and we found all these different techniques and different things, and we started exploring them and starting trying to line up how they would solve our problems.
You spoke a lot about Victor Varchik and watching his videos as well and learning from him as well.
Victor. Yeah, I mean, you know, I love Victor and Whitney when they get together. Like the whole YouTube's thing that they did, you know, leading up to KubeCon, where they were looking at the CNCF landscape and choosing technologies off of that, and how do you use those to help solve problems and come up with real value. We've really bought into that. You know, start using things off the landscape, start using things out of open source, build that value early, demonstrate that value iteratively, and then just keep building on that kind of sprint by sprint and, you know, quarter by quarter in our different delivery processes.
Yeah, I do have to give a big shout out to everyone here and the CNCF. They're really generous with their time and their learning and totally willing to share it, which is amazing. On to the meat and bones of it. So before we started this keynote, I put a post out on LinkedIn and asked for some questions. So we had a few come through. And I'm going to start this section with one of them. So our friend Lou, who works at Gitpod, has asked, how did you decide where to start? Because you've spoken about that you wanted to go on this platform as a product journey. You've spoken about this incremental and iteration.
Yeah.
Where do you start?
Yeah, so the wider team that I'm part of, we talk to our customers a lot. You know, being a large financial services organization, we've got a lot of governance, a lot of processes we've got to go through. There's a lot of committees and, you know, a lot of different working groups and things like that. And we have these regular touch points with our customers, and we work on kind of the view that they have on how they're going to use and adapt and transform their services, and how they're going to come up with new services that help support our customers and do good things for our customers. And so we hook into that regularly. We're having those conversations. We understand their aspirations and their aims. We've got these 5-year roadmaps that they kind of maintain all the time, so it's always constant. You know, we do that several times a year. And we create our hosting strategy based around that and our application mapping that we do with them. So there's a lot of information that we're always talking to them about. And we were able to tap into that and understand kind of where they want to be, you know, in the future, not right now. We're able to start looking at that and then start pulling that into our hosting strategy to think, well, if that's where they want to be in these years, we need to be ahead of the game. So how do we do that? What are the things we're going to do? And we picked out the key bits of technology that they were talking about, related that back to our hosting strategy and where we want to be in some of the transformation activities. And then we came up with a kind of list of things that we want to start doing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it also sounds like you've gone quite broad. Did you have to do any thinking about who would be your first user or like your target customer?
Yeah, absolutely. It's important, you know, and, you know, big shout out to William and his point about, you know, build it and they will come, right? Because that's the normal wisdom. If you build it, you know, you shouldn't build it and they will come. But when we started talking to some of these customers, these interactions that we've got regularly, we kind of got, you know, that whole trust thing that was mentioned earlier. I think it might have been Charity that mentioned trust.
Yeah.
Can't actually remember who it was that said it earlier. They've heard it all before, right? You get a lot, especially in Scotland, right? We're very cynical. So there's a lot of cynicism coming out, right? And he said, you know, heard this all before, seen it all before, you know, this isn't going to work. And you do get a level of that. And the customers, I've heard it from several customers saying, seeing is believing, show us. So we had to pick some of those technologies and some of those customers where, you know, we know where their challenges are, right? We know they might not have the most amount of staff. We know that the transformation activities they've got to do and the challenges they've got. Start working with some of them, start talking to them, identify some of those key technologies, and we've picked those to go off and start with those first. We'll come up with those for a demo, and then we'll do buy-in. The reason I'm doing sessions like this in KubeCon, I'm talking externally and I'm getting good feedback, and we're learning a lot out of that, and we're kind of getting validation of what we're doing, but we're also talking to ourselves. And in doing that, talking to ourselves, even in the practice runs that we've done with things like our infrastructure as code community or our architecture practice, we're getting that awareness, we're getting people interested. I've had several customers out of these coming back to us and saying, could we get involved? Could we start working with you early? Which is brilliant, right? It's really good to see.
And are they, so you spoke about them customers, I guess there are users, but also people who might want to contribute to your platform. Are they both in those groups? Because I know you've mentioned silos, security, database teams, billing, all of those functions that are in the bank that are so important.
It was slightly touched on earlier, and I think the larger the organization you are, the harder it is to solve all the problems yourself, right? So traditionally, in a centralized team, we might have tried to come up with all the answers. That's not the way forward anymore. And so we're really big at the moment on building up our community approach. We've built up our communities of practice, really successful, people sharing a lot of that knowledge. Now what we really want to do with kind of our GitOps type approach and our usage of Git is that omni-repo approach, where we can get people actually, the code becomes observable, right? If you see it, you can start looking at it, you can start contributing to it. And so that whole contribution model is a real big thing for us. That's one of the reasons why we chose the tooling that we did. It was really about that contribution model, right? How can we have those demo examples that people can then start contributing to and start making better? We can start really small, but then they can look at that, they can pick it up, they can change it, they can contribute it back. And if we think it's really, really good and it's going to get that consistency across the org, then we'll promote that higher up and we'll make it available for everyone to use. And that's how we'll get the consistency going forward, not that kind of documentation-based approach of the past.
Yeah, you've mentioned before documentation as code and, keep it all together, keep it all in the same place so you can keep it up to date. You've mentioned tooling there. Sorry, I'm going to dig in with the tooling a little bit because we've had a lot of questions today in general around how did you pick your portal? Have you tried any other portal tooling? So what tools have you picked and what led you to those decisions to pick those tools?
If I go back a year ago, I think I didn't come across Canoe a year ago. We did look at Pulumi and we looked at Humanitech and we looked at various tools out there. We settled on Syntasso Kratix, as you know. Other parts of our organization are trying to solve some of the problems as well. So we've got a fantastic enterprise engineering team who stand up a lot of the centralized tools that we use and manage, for the developer experience. And they were already away looking at the developer experience, looking at Backstage. As someone said earlier, start with the simple things like the documentation and the templating and the catalog. Those were the things they were already looking at. And so we were looking for tools that fitted in with that. But we were looking for something that fitted in for the way we wanted to do the platform engineering, the way we wanted to do that that reuse and that contribution model that would fit in nicely with that, but also that we didn't have to go off and do a lot of the development work around kind of the templates in the catalog, right? And Kratix fits the model for that. We also knew we wanted to move away from a DevOps model for this new type, As I say, we classified the pieces of work and we said, you've got type 1, which is the existing teams doing Terraform and going off and doing the DevOps type approach they've got now. You've got type 2, which are the customers who are maybe doing self-orchestration via ticket ops, they're raising ServiceNow requests and people will fulfill that. We want to go down a different model for type 3, self-service, via that portal, using Backstage, hooking into something that's an API, making sure that portal was done and all that logic, all that business stuff, all that documentation and everything was in the code instead.
And is that how you approach things like governance? Sorry, I'll give you a sip and try and chit chat for a second. You've spoken a lot about keeping everything together as code. That's quite different to how I've worked in financial services before.
Yeah.
Manual sign-offs, manual checks, compliance, governance, security are often quite a slow, burdensome part of the development process. How have you managed to incorporate that into your platform?
Yeah, that is the challenge, right? How do you do that? How do you flip from human-centric processes, human-centric governance, and really it's bake it in, right? Treat it like a cake. You get all those ingredients and bake them into that cake, right? Should have used a whiskey analogy. But yeah, we're working with those different teams. And, a lot of this is about engagement. If we can engage those different teams, if we can start having them collaborate and be part of building this, if they can start seeing the code and they can start, you know, more like an attestation method, so they can actually see it in the code, and then we've got the automation that's wrapped around checking the things that are in the code. It's a different approach, right? So it takes time. I'm not gonna lie. You know, it's a long journey that we're on. We're at the start of this journey, really. Not the start, but this is still year 1 and a bit for us, right? And what's probably going to be a 3+ type journey, you know. But we're already seeing all those green shoots and all those benefits already happening, and we're just building on that every quarter by every quarter.
Oh yeah, my experience has been that actually a lot of those traditionally human processes, they're all coming around to automation as well, because they've realized their skills don't scale and they want it to be repeatable. You know, the outcome is better if you make it automated and it's not just a human being.
Yeah, I mean, one of those customers that I talked about was our security team, right? You know, we were doing the drive run for KubeCon, and one of the architects in there was he was in attendance, he was listening, he reached out after that session, and he said, could we work with you in the next quarter? So we've been doing the planning this week on that, where, you know, we're starting to work with them, starting to get them involved and actually working on some of their things as products in this new manner, rather than the other way that we're going to do it in the past. So those are the benefits that we're starting to see from talking internally, externally, showing people what we're doing, and then trying to bring them on board. And we've been successful in doing that quarter by quarter. We brought more and more of the platform teams in on that journey, and that's kind of our direction of travel. We'll keep doing that.
Yeah, that sounds great. So you've told us a little bit about what you're doing now. What, if you could do anything differently, would it be? What would you change? What have you learned?
Yeah, really good question. I think I would make a better case for doing it outside of the organization and outside of the existing governance and the constraints. You know, if I look back at the time we spent over the last year, probably the biggest chunk of time for us to get going and get started was trying to be those good corporate citizens, right? Trying to go through those existing processes that were really meant for the type 1 and type 2 stuff. It took us a while to really classify that, you know, because we went wide, we went deep, we did a lot of investigations, but we tried to kick things off so that we could start building quickly as well. And I think if we knew then what we know now, we would have made the argument to kind of go outside of the organization and do it. You know, a bit like the early cloud adoption days where you could use your credit card, you could go and get like an AWS subscription, and you could just get cracking and you would get those results really quickly. That's really what we want to do. So one of the things that we fed back in today, you know, we've been doing our PI planning today for the next quarter's work. We're working with our cloud team. We're working jointly on that sandpit. I think that's the right term for America, sandbox, sandpit. That sandpit type environment approach, so that as part of our products, we're creating that and making that available for others so that they get the benefits that we didn't get, but we will get those benefits going forward. And I think that'll be really powerful for a lot of our first consumers when that type of offering is made available for them, that they can go out and they can do more of that experimentation with all those security controls and with all those guide rails all baked in, rather than having to stand it up themselves.
There is something very powerful about having gone through that process that your users have gone through. So you know exactly what you need to build now to make their lives easier. You've really built up a huge amount of empathy for your users through this process. So it's a really like, it's on balance, right? Because there are definitely benefits to doing it the way you've done it, but it does mean that it took you a lot longer to get started than I imagine you were hoping for.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you look at the, you know, talk about the KubeCon presentation, go and check it out on YouTube. There is a very blurred out, obfuscated diagram in there that we got from one of our customers. And it's the journey that they documented, that they take to take their type 2 patterns, you know, and self-orchestrate that themselves. The number of hoops they've got to jump through, the number of stages, the amount of time it takes. You know, they were talking months, let's be honest. They were talking months to go through that. And that's where kind of one of our objectives came from, right? It's taken them months. How do we get that down to 1 hour? That's one of our targets, one of our OKRs. And when we started chatting to them, we had that empathy, right? Because we went through that process ourselves at the start. We validated that. We walked in their shoes. And so we were able to actually, talk to them about that and say, yeah, we feel your pain too. We understand. We're going to fix that. And, that's what's going to build up the trust, right? Is us having that empathy, having been through it, having taken that away as one of the problems, we're going to solve that for them. We're not going to solve all the problems. I think it was a great point today that don't use, platforms as a product as a silver bullet. Not everything can be solved by using platforms as a product. I've turned some customers away in the last 3 days from kind of being on board and being part of what we're trying to do because it wasn't applicable for what they were wanting to do.
Right.
They were trying to containerize things that really didn't need to be containerized, or it was things that an analyst were doing that really should be on a data platform rather than as part of the platform. Because the platform stuff's about reuse and it's about that consistency, certainly for us.
And that focus, right? So you want to have a focused customer that you can serve really effectively and then maybe grow, but start with that. What's our initial use case? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's all about size as well, right? The bigger your organization, I think the more benefits you're going to get out of platform as a product. The smaller your organization, your challenges are going to be very, very different from large orgs like us. And in financial services, it was said earlier on, security is one of the big concerns, right? And that consistency and all those guardrails, those are the things that take people a long, long time. That in other organizations, you might not get that because you aren't regulated.
Yeah. I know you mentioned how long it took before. I've seen some of your proof of concept and MVP demos and how fast that's gone now with some of your amazing team. And it's, night and day. So I can imagine all of the people that you're showing this to have been really excited.
Well, I think I was in the chat earlier on, and someone was saying that it's great, yet another tool I've got to learn. We took some people that were relatively new to the organization who knew nothing about Terraform, didn't really know much about AWS, didn't know anything about Kratix, didn't know anything about Kubernetes, and within one program increment, 1 quarter, they did all that learning, they did all the kind of paired working with other people, and they built something productive as a product that we could actually consume. They were working on the developer environments that we're actually creating as a product. We have one of the I'm not going to say junior staff, but what I mean. Someone relatively new picked this up and ran with it and actually produced something, and then that can be incremented every single sprint now. Different things added to that. Different people can collaborate on that. It was really brilliant to see. It just proved the point that this is absolutely possible.
Yeah. So last question, because I know it's going to be late for everybody and even later for us. What's next? Where do you see your platform going in the next 6-12 months?
Yeah, so we've announced the plans. We're doing more rollout, more working with customers, more products, getting them on there, getting some feedback. I think that feedback is important. Getting that in there and just adding more value to the organization, adding more products in there, rolling it out to more of our product teams' involvement, more customers' involvement. The collaboration side of things is really what we're laboring on now. I think that's going to be big for us, especially next quarter. We'll do a lot of the work this quarter so that next quarter other people can start picking it up and can start helping contribute to those different compound promises, those compound products that we're going to create using quite a lot of the building blocks that we've already got.
It's amazing. Thanks for talking to me today, Chris. I appreciate it. And cheers.
Thanks for the questions. And
and actually, thank you both so much. I actually have one question for you, Chris. It's kind of been in my mind since the last time you presented. In fact, I'm going to put a direct quote from you in the chat. I don't know if you want to bump it in there. You said something that was really interesting about keeping your IP dumb and putting all of the logic in building via the API itself. So
thanks for crediting me with that, Lisa. That's a Victor quote, to be honest.
Okay.
I had a long conversation. I'm a big fan of Victor, and I met him at KubeCon Paris, right? So I was a complete techie fanboy. But I spent a lot of time with Victor. We had some really good conversations over a couple of nights. That was a really timely YouTube that he did. I think it was the week before KubeCon, or maybe the one before that. And we've been using that in some of the conversations, right? Don't try and put all that logic into your IDP. Put that into your API And I think that's one of the things that we get with Kratix, right? We've got the Syntasso Kratix Enterprise. It's got a builder component that builds the forms for us. So we don't need to think about how we build that. We don't need to have a developer doing that. If we expose it as an API as one of the inputs, then that logic comes out and comes into the form, right? That's really what he was talking about. I think there were some people who were, talking about putting more and more business logic into your portal. They're trying to say, well, no, actually, you want to put it in your products and then keep your front end simple, keep it as a front end, because then all that logic is part of the product and can be maintained as part of that code and people can contribute to that. But it might be harder for them to contribute to the portal because we all know how difficult it is. We saw the monolith discussion earlier on tonight, how difficult it is to update something that's really successful, right? You're just adding more and more complexity and more cost.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought that was a good point. But okay, so I mean, I think this has been an amazing day, and thank you, Chris, for being there all day and answering so many other.
No, you're welcome. It's been great.
Yeah,
thanks for inviting me.
I hope you learned stuff as well that you will.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I've got loads written down that we're going to start applying.
That's awesome. Well, we love that we can bring this content to the real world for practical use. So that's so great. And that I love finishing Kube Crash with fireside chats. I think it just keeps it real, and we're like just showcases what's really happening out there. So we really appreciated that. So with that, unless you have anything else you want to close us, so we're going to say goodbye to our speakers, and then Danielle and I will just do a real quick wrap. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.